I will read, but I'm not going to read huge pieces because, to be honest, when I'm at an event, I'm listening to authors. Sometimes I get bored listening to them reading. So if anybody will do a question and answer, any questions you have about my work, about me being Irish, about Brexit, because I come from that part of the country, please just go ahead and ask any questions. I'll read first from my debut, which is A Son Called Gabriel, and then I'll read from The Moment of Truth. You will probably see there's a third book there. That one actually is set in England, and it's published only in the UK. I was very pleased and shocked to see it here, actually. The theme of my writing is basically social conscience. I like to write about things that are important in society, issues that need to be looked at and investigated. And that has always been my guiding principle when I write. And with that in mind, A Son Called Gabriel is, it's a coming of age coming out in Northern Ireland during a time known as the Troubles, which is the Northern Irish conflict. And there is a little bit of, there's definitely some semi-autobiographical parts, but I also wrote a lot of fiction too. But my mother sort of said to me, I hope you haven't made me look bad in the book, but it really is fiction. And it's about a young boy. It starts off when he's 6 years of age. He's very intelligent, and but he finds out that he's growing up Catholic in a very strict household. There's fights between the Protestants and the Catholics, but he's also fighting within himself as to what he is becoming. And there's his inner conflict and his outer conflict growing up in this very bigoted community. There are some very interesting characters in the book that add humor, add pathos. And the piece I decided to write about is he's going through his period where he's trying to make himself be different and dated girls, and he's fascinated by this Protestant girl who goes to a very private school in Northern Ireland. He goes to a Catholic private school, but it's not as hallowed, shall we say, as hers. And he's going, it's I guess what you would call the prom here. It's called a sixth form social over there. It's the same principle. They're leaving school. So he and his friend Penny, who's a very eccentric character, and his cousin Martin, who is Martin comes across as gay, but he's really not, and but he's a real fashion doyen, and they are actually driving up to the school. Toward the end of the year, I passed my driving test, though my parents would not allow me to borrow the car to attend dances yet. But another perk of being a sixth former was that we got invites to parties at other schools called sixth form socials. When Martin and Penny, now in their final year, I went to my first social at St. Clair's College in a coastal resort town 10 miles from our school. It was a cheerful event, monitored scrupulously by glowering nuns in off-white habits, who, circling the dance floor perimeter like beneficent tigresses, were ready to pounce should a dirty-minded schoolboy attempt to kiss one of their precious charges. An unexpected invitation came to attend the Granderson College social. It was the first time St. Malachy's boys had been invited to a Protestant social. Schools of different denominations rarely socialized, and when they did, it was always at athletic and debating competitions. We'd no doubt been invited because our senior rugby team was doing surprisingly well and gaining respect in the hallowed circles of Protestant school sports departments. Father Rafferty was delighted. In his eyes, we'd crossed some invisible barrier. He swooped into the common room to strongly recommend a contingent of us attend, and that we behave in exemplary fashion when we did. "I'm not going," Penny said, after I told him I knew a pupil there. I spiced it up by adding she'd spent the entire summer teaching me how to ride, though omitted to say it was on a horse. "We should go," Martin said, turning down the volume of the Neil Sedaka tape playing in Penny's car. "It'd be an education." Penny adjusted the rear view mirror so he could check his pimples. Education, my arse, he said. No way am I going there. He squeezed a pimple on his chin. You can park your car in a dark corner of the school car park so nobody will see it, Martin said. He had articulated exactly what I'd been thinking, both of us having chalked Penny's reticence down to embarrassment about his old car, with its noisy exhaust and a fresh dent on the passenger door, which also screeched unmercifully when opened. It's got nothing to do with my car, Penny said, looking savagely at Martin. I can't abide the thought of hanging around snotty Protestants. Martin worked on Penny and got him to change his mind. On the night of the social, as we drove up the winding drive, Penny's car headlights struck the enormous pale grey girths of beech trees and miles of sprawling rhododendrons. The hedge was endless. Just as we were beginning to think the drive would never terminate, he turned a curve and a rambling Georgian mansion with ivy-covered gables confronted us. Penny emitted a great rush of air through his teeth. It's just like Queen's University. We thundered into the half-full car park. Martin peered around the car frantically. Park over there. He jabbed his finger excitedly in the direction of a less well-lit area. Penny drove toward an empty bay next to 4 girls climbing out of an orange BMW 2002. Not here, I said through gritted teeth. Both of you go to hell. Penny reversed into the bay so fast, he caused the driver exiting the BMW to whip her leg back inside and shut the door. Martin lowered his head. I'm not getting out of this tin can until they go inside. He pretended to search for something at his feet. I'd never survived the screech of that fucking door. The driver glared in at Penny before joining her friends, who were adjusting their hair and patting wrinkles out of their skirts. All the girls turned to look at Penny's car and then started towards the entrance. Martin waited until they disappeared inside before opening the car door. It screeched, especially monstrous given the school's regal setting. How many times have I told you to do something about this, Martin said. Placing his hands at the back of his neck, he flung out his hair so the ends flowed evenly over his shirt collar. A car entered the parking lot. Jesus, somebody's coming. Let's split, Gabriel. My cousin didn't wait for me. He spurted across the car park in his bottle green flared pants, slowing to a walk only when he reached the narrow path sweeping to the entrance. I hurried after him. You could have waited, I said as I joined him. That car's a fucking disgrace. Well, hurry up and pass the driving test and borrow Uncle Frank's car. His face went splotchy. Martin had already taken the test. Twice. He was a good driver, but he couldn't handle the conditions of the driving test. The pressure made him forget to signal when turning, and he could never execute a 3-point turn. It took him 5 maneuvers. We checked our reflections in the glass panes of the entrance door. Is my hair still nice at the back, Gabriel? It's fine. The school social, like others we'd attended, was set up in the gymnasium. Within a minute of entering, Fiona, whom I hadn't seen for almost 2 years, called out to me from across the room. She wore a checked midi-skirt and a dazzlingly white blouse with abundant ruffles that set off a hunter green twin set. A single strand of pearls was her only adornment. Her hair was ABBA blonde, though now boyishly short, and her cheeks were as ruddy as I remembered. She wore no makeup. I was excited she'd even remembered my name. Penny arrived and I made the introductions. How's old Stroller? I asked. He's turned into a fine jumper, and I've got a grey now too. Martin's eyes lit up. He loved horses. Mind if I try him out sometime? I asked. She laughed and affectionately smacked my arm. I could see Penny, despite his vitriol about mixing with Protestants, was suitably impressed. Sure, but no jumping this time, Fiona chortled. So did Martin. Indeed, he buzzed around her like a bumblebee around a flower. He remarked on her elegant necklace and asked if she wanted to dance. Fiona seemed surprised as it was still very early, but she accepted and led him away to join a circle of ladies dancing in a dusky corner. Within 2 minutes, she returned with the girls in tow. After introductions, we chatted until, as always happens in such situations, people begin engaging in side conversations. Have you decided which universities you'll apply to next year? She asked me. Whoever will accept me. I'm serious. I'm thinking of reading law at Trinity or Queen's. No English universities? The idea of attending an English university both terrified and attracted me. My adventurous side longed to quit Ulster and leave all the petty bigotry behind, but the quiet side felt sure that strange men in England might take advantage of me. I'd read of such things in the English press, how perverts sought out dilly boys who sat on the steps of the Eros fountain at Piccadilly Circus. Such reports filled me with dread. It was impossible to share this with Fiona, though. She'd been to school in England and would probably laugh at my foolishness. "Shall we dance?" I asked. She nodded and we went out on the floor. "So you really haven't applied to any university then?" she persisted. It struck me she might think I was just a narrow-minded Catholic. "Someone I know goes to university in Cardiff and likes it a lot," I said. "Maybe I'll apply there. Perhaps Durham also." Our eyes locked and she smiled. The more I looked at her, the more I began to forget about the disturbingly boyish hair. "And you?" "I'm planning to read economics anywhere but here. The older I get, the sicker I get of all the fighting and bigotry. I'm leaning toward Cambridge, Bristol, or the London School of Economics." I admired her directness in alluding to the quagmire of Northern Irish politics so assertively. Not once during that summer, when we'd first met, had we mentioned politics. We talked only horses in school. "All good schools," I said. "If I end up in Bristol and you in Cardiff, then we'll likely bump into each other. There'll only be the Severn Bridge and a few miles separating us." She grinned mischievously. "I didn't know that." The set came to an end and I stood beside her, utterly unsure what to do. I was intrigued to know more about her, but the fact that she was a girl, as well as the fact that I hadn't experienced any reassuring surge of physical attraction to her, weighed on my mind. Before I could decide or take my cue from her, a thin girl in an emerald satin dress brayed Fiona's name from across the gym and slithered towards us. This was probably a secret arrangement they had to aid one another in awkward situations with boys. Caroline, my sister, told me girls did this sort of thing. But Fiona made no attempt to leave. About 10 feet to my right, Panny looked similarly perplexed. He stood by a girl's side, thrusting his head back every now and again to adjust his mop of unruly hair, a habit of his when he was dead unsure. Fiona introduced the girl in green, Heather, and we chatted politely for half an hour. No signal came forth to call Fiona away, and after an "absolutely lovely to meet you," Heather slithered away. Heart pounding, I slipped my arm around Fiona's waist and couldn't believe it when she immediately sidled up to me. All the barriers fell. It was as if we'd seen each other every day since that summer we'd first met. We danced, helped ourselves to food from the buffet table, chatted and danced some more. Toward the end of the evening, after learning she'd travelled to the social with Heather and another friend, I asked slyly if I could see her home. I knew she'd decline. She was an impeccably bred Protestant and would most likely suggest we make another date. She accepted without hesitation, which put me in a terrible pickle. I hadn't asked Panny. There was also the dreadful matter of his car. I excused myself and walked frantically around the gym looking for him, all the while cursing myself for my damn stupidity. I found him near the coffee urns. He was chatting to the girl I'd seen him dancing with earlier. As soon as propriety permitted, I butted in and pulled him aside. "We're taking Fiona home. I'll do the same for you when my parents let me borrow the car." "You sly dog," he said. I was relieved the first obstacle had been so easily overcome. I glanced about. "Panny, what excuse should we use about your car when she hears it?" Its hideousness could not be ignored, especially when Fiona had told me as casually as if she was talking about the weather that she was having both horses shipped to England when she went over to university. That's how damned rich her father was. And now I was seeing her daughter home in a cacophonous death trap. "Don't push it," Panny said. I didn't think she'd accept a ride home on the first night. His girl was now looking quizzically at us. "Come to think of it," he said, "where does Fiona live exactly?" "Castle Benham." "Are you out of your fucking mind?" Panny turned away and looked over at the girl, mouthing he'd be right over and sealing his commitment with a honeyed smile. When he turned back to me, I got a bulge-eyed snarl. "We'll have to go through a bad Protestant area to get there." His voice had lowered precipitously when he uttered the word Protestant on account of where we were. "It's late. We could end up with cutthroats if the UDA have set up an illegal checkpoint to try and snare Catholics." "Oh, don't be silly." I laughed to disguise my own sudden unease. "We won't get snared." While Fiona chatted to some friends after the social ended, Penny, my cousin, and I discussed the problem clandestinely. Martin sided with me and Penny eventually gave in. Outside, Fiona glanced at the dented car doors, Outside, Fiona's glance at the dented car door hinted strongly that I'd been right to be concerned. Its tooth-aching screech, notwithstanding Martin's burst of fake coughs as he whipped it open, confirmed it. We roared our way across the car park to join the line of exiting cars. Sorry about the noise, I whispered. Giles says the body shop did a horrible repair job on his exhaust. Sorry, Gabriel, I didn't hear that, she said. What did you say? Boys and girls gawked in as they crossed in front of the car or walked alongside it. The line moved slowly and then came to an eventual halt. Unable to fake it any longer, Martin said something about searching the dial to find Radio Luxembourg and lowered his head toward the radio. You know damn well it's pre-programmed, Penny said. He pressed the button and the Radio Luxembourg jingle came on to accompany the metallic snort of his muffler, thus obliging Martin to continue staring ridiculously at the radio or lift his head and look out the window again. He chose to lift his head and look out. After what seemed like hours, the traffic started moving and the muffler's whine grew to a roar as we sped towards Fiona's home. So that's just a section from A Son Called Gabriel.